Hello and welcome to Straight Talk, Supply Chain Insights, the podcast for your supply chain leader who is on the go and wants to be in the know. And now, your host, Lora Cecere.
Welcome to Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights. My name is Lora Cecere. I'm the founder of Supply Chain Insights, and this podcast is designed for the supply chain leader who wants to be in the know, but is busy and is on the go, or busy and just trying to figure out how things are going. And I like to really address the current state with direct, hard-hitting feedback. So to that end, today I'd like to cover some of the current news that's surrounding the acquisitions and investments of the technology vendors. I used to write about these on the blog Supply Chain Shaman, but I just find it's kind of negative energy, and I want to really focus on positive energy in the blog and building towards the future. So let's get going, and let's start with what's happening and what I think about the current state of the market. So it may be old news for some, but JDA renamed to Blue Yonder, and then Panasonic invested $5.6 billion in Blue Yonder to basically drive a transformation of Blue Yonder around the software and hardware assets of Panasonic. So a number of companies have asked me, what do I think about that? And I'm thinking, supply chain technologies, just kind of circle the drain. What happens is we see an innovation. So we went from client server to cloud, and Blue Yonder, is part of that acquisition strategy of moving through the cloud technology stack. They acquired a lot of software, Kinaxis, i2, Red Prairie, went through a consolidation movement, were heavily debt-laden, focused primarily on retail, did some good things in the retail space, but sort of left their manufacturing clients behind. And now they are being acquired by a largely technology vendor. So what do I think? Well, I think that it will be a continuation of Blue Yonder circling the drain. I have never seen a technology company successfully acquire a software company and make it successful. And the reason is that the models are just extremely different. And it takes, a leadership around software to really drive the next innovation. And what needs to happen with the Blue Yonder stack is not just the movement to cloud, but the embracing of NoSQL and the movement to cognitive and graph and the rethinking of planning. And I just don't see the leadership there to do it. So I say, if you're a Blue Yonder client, continue with that investment, follow this closely. But I'm not betting on Blue Yonder or Panasonic's version of Blue Yonder to really help us to drive supply chain planning forward. In addition, this week, EDA Open continues its consolidation strategy to buy BlueJay. BlueJay was purchased by EDA Open for $1.7 billion. And, the press is all about how EDA Open is now going to broaden its, network capabilities for BlueJay and move into the transportation space. And again, I don't buy it. And the reason I don't buy it is that EDA Open has been a consolidator over the last decade of asset after asset after asset after asset, and I don't see the synchronization, the harmonization, and the exponential value from these consolidations. What I see is the, use of the maintenance revenue to basically fund operations. And I struggle with EDA Open's lack of innovation and the ability for them to basically drive synergy through the acquisitions. Many of their assets are planning assets like Terra Technology or Vision Chain, which became Orchestro, or Steel Wedge, and they're still really struggling to put those together. And then many of their acquisitions have been more supply chain executional based, like Amber Road, or the conventional EDA Open platform, or now Blue Jay. But how does it all fit together, and why should I care? EDA Open just leaves me wanting. A lot of the discussions around how EDA Open, when it tried to go IPO, was really struggling at the ability to manage a balance sheet, and I get that, and I commend Michael for, driving better value at the balance sheet. But the end-to-end message is largely a hodgepodge of consolidations that are sort of like a closet of misfit shoes. And so, they had to do a capital event with the recent IPO, and they've got some funds for investment, and now they've invested in Blue Jay. So I don't think it's going to drive value for anyone other than, the pockets of EDA Open. So I say to people, if you're an EDA Open customer, continue. Don't do a 180. There's no need for alarm, but there's no need for really betting on EDA Open for future investment either. I think, play it safe, stay close to the company, basically take, small steps with them, but don't bet your future on EDA Open, and don't bet your future on Blue Yonder. In addition, we've seen a number of companies drive investments for supply chain execution software. We saw Project 44, and now we see the evolution of FarEye. And these are tools for telematics and helping us to understand visibility. FarEye this week announced it raised $100 million of Series E capital. And again, I don't get real excited about FarEye or Project 44 or FarEye, kind of that group of technologies, because we're really not designing visibility with the goal in mind. My struggle is that the average company has 20 visibility projects on the go, and they're all in different functions. We've got a transportation group in Region A, or we've got a, sales effort in Region B, but they're not holistic, and most companies don't have a holistic strategy for visibility. They talk about terms like control towers, and it's rather vacuous. But I say that, people really got to drive visibility outside in, connecting this disparate data, the streaming data, to applications, and then drive with the goal in mind, drive back to allocation and ATP and inventory matching and customer-centric policies. And the problem is that we've got the technologies growing up around the management of the signals, but we don't have the maturity of the technologies around the core applications in the enterprise to use the signals. And so as a result, many of the visibility projects are laying outside the organization with people talking about visibility, but it's sort of like a patchwork quilt that hasn't been put together. And people lack the vision to put that together. So I think that Project 44, FarEye, FarEye have really got to take a next step and look at how they build outside-in processes, how they redefine value networks to really be able to drive value from what's happening in these particular markets. Anytime a company accepts this kind of a round, it's typically not good news for the user of that technology, because often the money is used for marketing or geolocation expansion. And with each round of investment, the core technologists will typically receive a liquidity event, and with each event, they are likely to leave the company, and so it really spurs turnover of employees. So, yeah, I'm not real bullish on these either. So what I find is that in the market, the companies that do the best are the companies that stay very close to the technology innovation they've built, and they basically build over time to drive markets. So if we look at Kinaxis or we look at 09, both of them are different innovations. Kinaxis was an in-memory model primarily for material-centric companies to be able to look at the translation of planning into material requirements for complex bill of materials. They moved into cloud in 2005, and for very little money, they've actually propelled Kinaxis to now be about $220 million. That started with $33 million seed investment, but has really been very focused on growing over time, not large amounts of equity, but really pushing that business model. And if you look at someone like 09, who's growing around graph technology, they did receive $100 million, but they received $100 million when they were at a later stage than FarEye. And again, they're driving innovation around graph technology, which allows us to look at semantics in the supply chain. So it is an innovation that is driving new thinking. Or if you take someone like OMP, who I think is a strong contender in the supply chain planning space, OMP has been very private, been very focused on growing over time, tightly held by the investors. And, the employees have been in the company a long time. So net, every time you see big flashy investments, you should stop and say, wow, I'm not sure about this, because it's a chance for turnover of the company, change in leadership, and you've got to get close to the company. And typically it is not good news for the business user. Anytime you see a technologist, like a hardware technologist, buy a software company, you should raise a red flag, because I know of no investment by a hardware company and a software company that has been successful. So Honeywell's acquisition of Vocalec was not successful. I don't think Panasonic's acquisition of Blue Yonder is going to be successful. And likewise, when consulting partners buy software company, it's a low probability of success. Accenture's purchase of CAS, what's happening with Blue Cruise, the consulting model and the software model are distinctly different. Where I encourage companies to invest their money is where you've got a company that has received smaller amounts of capital and is on a value delivery roadmap, and there has been continuity of leadership in the company over time. Likewise, if you're an early adopter, I encourage you to look at companies that are going the NoSQL route, looking at rules-based ontologies, thinking about, how we can drive innovation forward with decision support being sets of flows, and looking at decision flows, workflow, cloud, and NoSQL together, and how we can transform that. And there's a few companies out there that are doing some interesting things. UC Boss is a company I'm covering right now, which is looking at, how do we use disparate data to drive a logical data model to be able to drive deep learning. And it's that kind of NoSQL that I think is extremely promising for the future. So this is Lora Cecere, and, I don't want to waste ink on, bad news, but I think that most of what we see in the market today with investments is not good news for business leaders. Coming out of the pandemic, supply chain is hotter. A lot of venture capitalists are looking at how can they invest in the supply chain market and really drive liquidity events for themselves, not necessarily how they drive business value for the business leader. And I think buyers should beware. So this is Lora Cecere with Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights. I hope this helps you. Until next time.